Here we are having a look at the Jetboil Zip. It is a smaller version of the Jetboil personal cooking system. It holds 800 mils worth of water compared to the regular Jetboil's 1 liter. So for that 800 mils, you're able to carry enough water for about a single freeze-dried meal, as well as something hot like a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. The cup itself has a insulating neoprene sleeve. It's useful to prevent yourself from getting burnt after you boil a cup of water. On the side, it has a handy reinstallation instructions so that way you can fit all the pieces of the stove back together again after taking it apart. One of the benefits of a stove system like this is the fact that all the pieces of the stove fit together in a single unit. This includes the gas, and it tries to make very good use of all the different pieces to make sure that it's useful for you. Starting right at the bottom, we take off the protecting cup, and the protecting cup itself has the function of having some measuring lines, so that way you can use it to measure water, however much water you may need to use, up to 1 cup. The bottom of the stove, you have the classic Jetboil design. The heat exchanger at the bottom is what makes the Jetboil system much more efficient than your regular stoves. This has a fairly good weight to it, and then it has a system where the pieces lock together onto the stove. Having a look at the top, you have a sipping hole so that way you can sip water or tea or coffee out of the top, as well as a strainer in case you happen to be boiling noodles or rice. Taking the lid right off, the first item we have at the top is a stove support. This is mostly useful if you have a pot that doesn't use the Jetboil system, or something like a frying pan. So one of those items that might be useful to have. We of course have the fuel and the stove coming in with it. The only fuel that will actually fit inside the cup is the 100 gram or the 3.5 ounce fuel. So anything larger, you'd have to carry that outside. Looking at the stove itself, you obviously have the burner. On the side, you have the adjusting knob. Unlike some other knobs, this is probably not the easiest to use in cold weather. One of the other things this stove is also missing is the piezo ignition, which is common on a lot of other Jetboil stoves. So if you're out in the wilderness, you need to make sure you have some matches or a lighter with you. Finally, at the very bottom, we have a pot support. The pot support is primarily to keep an extra stability on the ground while you're setting up in uneven areas. You can see that it has the ability to hold a couple of different sizes of stove while using the system. Now that we have all the pieces out of the cup, we can have a look at the inside of the cup itself. And what's also not visible on this video is the cup itself has measuring lines up to 500 mils or up to 2 cups worth of water. So it's a handy measure to make sure that you have generally enough water for your single freeze-dried meal. Now that we have all the pieces out, why don't we go ahead and start assembling the stove so that we can see how well it all fits together. So we have our pot support, and we'll throw our fuel on top of that. Not the easiest thing to put together. We'll attach the stove. It's fairly straightforward. The cup itself has guides and a locking system to it. It's not the easiest thing to use. You kind of have to fish for the guides, but it's something that you can definitely get used to. Finally, we have the measuring cup itself, and that fits a fully assembled Jetboil stove ready to cook. Alright, so for the purposes of this exercise, we have a canteen of water here, I put some ice cubes in to try and get it as cold as we could, the sort of water that we might get out of a glacier stream. I could use the measuring cup, but as we mentioned earlier, there are measuring lines on the inside of the cup, so we're just going to measure out about 2 cups worth, 500 mils, and we'll lay that to the side. With the Jetboil Zip, you don't have any special ignition, so you have to pull it a lighter and get it lit that way. The handle is not the easiest to get started, but here we go. Let's put the lid on, and let's put this on. There we go. So the Jetboil system is not the easiest thing to get all put together, but once you're on, it's on pretty well, and it's something that most people get used to. So let's see just how well this boils up our water. Some of the things we'll make note of while we do this is right underneath we have the flame going, and the fins that you see are to help with the heat exchange. It keeps the heat closer to the pot and tries to get much more of the heat applied to the water than your normal stove would. In breezy conditions, it might help a little bit against the wind dragging the heat away. Maybe not quite all that much, since you can see that air could quite easily get through those fins. Just pop the top off here. See if we can get an idea of progress. See, we're getting a little bit of heat going on. This is pretty cold water. It's just starting to steam a little bit now. And we will put that back on for another moment. It's doing a pretty good job getting this water going. Not a whole lot happening. A little bit of steam coming off the top. Put that on. Set back up here. It's a little breezy out here just at the moment, not a lot, but just enough that with some other stoves you'd probably experience a bit of your heat being blown off into the wind. As I put my hand around, I can feel some of the heat coming off, but not that much. It is doing a pretty good job of keeping most of the heat contained right at the bottom of the cup. And by doing that, it makes sure that you get the maximum heat and hopefully get it boiling faster. You can see some steam starting to come off now, so we're moving right along. And now we have definitely a lot of steam coming off. It's probably been just over 2 minutes. And we definitely have a rolling boil here. Ooh, hot. So we'll turn this off. Not the quickest thing to get turned off, but manageable nonetheless. Perhaps not with a pair of gloves. With a pair of gloves would be quite the challenge. Take this off. We have ourselves a nice hot tank of water, and why don't we go throw in a tea bag and wait for a cup of tea. So for a few final notes on the Jetboil Zip, I thought it was a very good stove. It lives up to its promises. It is very fast and is definitely a handy stove to have. It's not going to waste any space inside your pack. It fits everything it needs inside its compact space. I did find that the pot support was a little bit cumbersome. It fits loosely, which it needs to, but I would challenge it to possibly be an item I might leave behind. At the same time, it does help when the ground is a little bit not stable. It'll definitely help provide some stability. The stove itself is very workable, very easy to use, but the gas control is a little bit difficult. Even without gloves, I found it was difficult to actually get a good hold of and make it all work properly and turn efficiently. As far as the pot itself, it's a good size. It's going to be always useful. It's not too big, definitely not too small. And the Cozy does a good job at keeping your hands from burning while you're holding a hot cup of water. The measuring cups are definitely useful. They have the measuring lines that you need. And overall, I would say this is a good recommended stove to have if you're able to carry one.